the AI6 podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
Alex Murray, you're very welcome to AI6. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Joanne. Yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks.
So first of all, introduce yourself to our viewers and to our listeners of the podcast.
Yeah, my name's Al Murray. I'm a career police officer, having worked in the West Mids, Metropolitan Police, West Mercia Police, and the National Crime Agency, looking at serious organised crime. And for a couple of years, I've been the policing lead for AI, and am now the interim director for Police AI.
Well, when I came across this story, immediately I was like, I have got to speak to somebody who is leading this, because people who know my work going back 20 years, I started out in journalism, but then policing and communications and looking at it from the outside, from social media to digital comms to now artificial intelligence. And I have to say the UK are being particularly bold and brave in moving into AI and setting up Police AI. First of all, tell us about it. What is Police AI?
Police AI is a delivery agency. So there's quite a few people out there, as you know, and agencies that do quite a lot of forward thinking, a lot of academic work, and that's good and proper. But our USP is to get responsible AI into the front line, really. So it's got a very clear mandate, a very clear requirement, very clear performance objectives. And actually, when I reflect on everything we're doing, and sort of ironically, it feels like we're here to put humanity back into policing. So much of the digital revolution that you opened up with, Joanne, actually has taken officers off the street and away from people, and means that, really enthusiastic people join the police and then they find themselves slave to a laptop, filling in disclosure schedules or looking at CCTV or doing things that they didn't think they'd be doing, which are required by justice, but in actual fact, take people away from what they're best at, which is speaking to people. And I think AI has a massive role in this.
So the promise of productivity gains and giving your officers and investigators time back on the beat and to be integrating in communities where they serve is the big one. But of course, people are a bit skeptical about AI because we know the models can hallucinate. So what are you guys doing in, I guess, first of all, communicating what Police AI is to the public and gaining their trust?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And I have to say, having been like an institutional cop for a long time, we are in startup mode. So it feels like we're being entrepreneurial, we are recruiting and building. And like, we're not here to deliver AI, we're here to deliver responsible AI. And there are profound differences, as you know, more than most. And we have now got a comms team. And so we are looking at communicating everything we're doing. We're currently developing a public fronting register that shows how we register the AIs that we're using. And the surveying that we've seen, we haven't commissioned, but we've looked at Home Office surveying. We've looked at, there's an organisation called Centric that operates out of Sheffield that's interviewed 10,000 people. And also the Mayor's Office in London have interviewed many citizens. And actually the approach that the public have is they sort of expect the police to be using AI. And the levels of acceptance of the police using AI are quite high, like 58, 60%. It's all about context, isn't it? And how you use AI and where you use AI. And I'm sure we're going to dive into that.
Yeah. And so how far on is Police AI? I know the announcement is pretty recent, but you said you're in startup mode. What's your current capability looking like?
Yeah, good question. Well, we sort of knew this was coming and we didn't want to say, wait for the contract to be signed and then let's start working out what we're going to do in recruiting. So we have a core team. We have a guy called Harry who's come over from running the AI lab in Police Scotland to set up our lab. I've got somebody who's in charge of delivery, someone who's in charge of strategy. And there's so many things we can do right now, which we have commissioned and oversee. So we're working with some of the DDAT automation teams in the Home Office. We're working with the accelerated capabilities environment, and we've got some AI architects already working with us doing some good things. So yeah, we are making progress, even though we're in startup mode. And it's that trick, isn't it, of that metaphor of like driving the train whilst laying the tracks. That's what we're doing. So.
Yeah, and the technology is moving so fast. There is an expectation that you got to learn by doing and implementing and governing all at the same time. Where are the initial wins and benefits going to come from you guys? Have you identified particular pilots or use cases that you're moving forward first?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're actually in a non-controversial space, unfortunately for you as a journalist. So the, but they are profoundly interesting. So unfortunately, there's been an exponential rise in the people downloading child abuse imagery. So we think there's existing capability there that helps us find and triage and classify child abuse images. So we're working in that space. CCTV analytics, again, lots of people in this space, but we ingest, following a serious crime, hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV. And the ability to run an AI over that and say, find me the black car or this partial wedge in all that footage is profound. And then there's some really boring things associated with policing that I don't think the public fully understand. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but that police officers, are slave to. So there's nearly 500 pages of crime counting rules that we have to abide by. So when an incident happens, how do you classify it? AIs are really good at that, we think. And also at checking the progress of crime reports. So again, thousands of investigators around the country. And as a ex-leader myself, I was interested in how good are those investigations. AIs can assist with that. There's a thing called disclosure. Again, back in the day when I was a young cop, we used to do this handwritten, but it's a requirement on the police to look at all the material they're in possession of and to write it onto a disclosure manual or guidance for the Crown Prosecution Service. So we highlight anything that undermines our case, anything that we're not using, or anything that supports the case. Now, back in the day, that I could do that in an hour. Now you can imagine with the terabytes worth of data that we're seizing from electronic devices, it is a substantial undertaking that can take an investigator weeks and weeks full time to complete. And that's why there's disclosure reviews going on at the moment. And again, we think an AI can really assist there. And then there's in some of transcribe and translate. Again, it's a common technology, but used in policing, we need to understand error rates in a much more effective way. And in actual fact, we need to guard what goes into the criminal justice system very carefully. And then things like the 365 suite has Copilot and Copilot Studio as part of it. So how do we use agents effectively across policing? So they're all examples of things that we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to hear the use cases because the technology allows you to do this work at scale. And that's a real benefit. You mentioned Microsoft and Copilot. Are you combining existing tools on the market? Are you building your own internal domain expert models, or what's your approach?
Yeah, this is the $1 million question, isn't it? It's buy or build. And we think we have to do both. So there are unique areas, which is why you need police AI, because you don't want 43 police forces building different models. They're not big enough. They can't afford the architects or the engineers. So for some things, it's just good that we have the capability to build. And some of that might be subcontracted build. And we are working with some other labs around the country who are working on some of those use cases for us. But of course, it's the technology sector that's really good in this space. And so how do we buy effectively? There's economies of scale, but the one thing we are investing in is a laboratory so we can do we call it TEV, for the testing, evaluation and verification of claims made by technology companies on the effectiveness of their application. Hugely important in policing, perhaps less important elsewhere, but these ideas of 100% accuracy don't stand up to scrutiny. And again, if we are going to be open to the public, we need to be able to say, this is a model we're using, and this is how we've tested it. This is the ground truth. This was the accuracy level. And this is how the human integrates with this technology.
And when do you think all of those police forces will be able to benefit from what you're producing out of the lab?
Yeah, again, this is really interesting. And so we've taken the approach for not big tech drops across the whole of United Kingdom. We've got tech debt in different forces, and forces have different levels of readiness to receive products. And as you probably know, big tech drops across the whole of the country normally go over budget and are late. So what we do is we pilot stuff in forces and we go, okay, that looks like it's promising, and then let's spread it out from there. So let's go from pilot to 4 forces to 10 forces to the country. And that's what we're seeking to do, in fact, in all those applications, which is engaging with Pathfinder forces to push the product that we've developed or we've bought, and then it spreads out from there.
And let's talk about governance, and because the currency of policing is public trust. I'm in Ireland. We're part of the EU. We're governed by the EU AI Act, seen as one of the strictest pieces of legislation on the planet, although legislation can never keep up with technology, and it absolutely cannot keep up with AI. What's your own approach to governance? Because I know the UK government and Keir Starmer, former Prime Minister, was very, again, forward-thinking in saying, the UK must lead and it can lead. But how are you dealing with the governance piece of your ambition?
Yeah, well, just perhaps reflecting on your latter comment, I think he's right. And I'm really proud to be in the UK where we are being, I don't even think it's audacious, it's just necessary. A, criminals are using it. And B, with the way technology has changed, if we don't embrace AI, unfortunately, the service we will deliver to the communities will be much more expensive for a much worse service. So, it feels like a no-brainer. So back to your first part of the question, which is governance. As I mentioned, we're not interested in AI. We're only interested in responsible AI. And being responsible comes with a whole set of requirements. And so every chief constable is signed up to we call them the AI covenant, which they're quite high-level objectives, things like it must be robust, it must be transparent, it must be explainable. And these are things that we can all debate around what that means. So we partnered with some very good AI scholars in Northumbria University to create the Responsible AI checklist that takes those adjectives and sort of makes them much more detailed. So let's highlight the bias associated with this model, and how do you ameliorate the extent of that bias, or how do you change the settings to eliminate the bias, which is what the Met have done and South Wales have done with the live facial recognition algorithm. Secondly, how do you train a police officer or a member of police staff to receive the output? That is really key, because you and I and many have all been part of the Computer Says No sort of community where it drives you mad, doesn't it? Where people misinterpret outputs, and AI outputs are necessarily nuanced sometimes. So you have to understand that. And then the third area is necessity, proportionality, all of those, legality, obviously. And then how it's governed is police and crime commissioners will still have independence and still work with chief constables on what goes in their police forces. We think the PCCs have a clear role in relation to representing the public on the AI use in their force area. And we are setting up national sort of ethics committees that can look at the more contentious use of AI and how we, again, mitigate concern, as well as a registry that the public can see.
And you mentioned how officers are receiving the outputs from AI. This is a whole transformation for people. I speak to officers all the time across Europe, and it's just another new language that they need to learn, another new competency. How are your colleagues receiving police AI, and how are you going to scale fluency and literacy?
Yeah, and it is context specific. So part of our role is to work with the College of Policing in improving sort of AI literacy across the many hundreds of thousands of officers in England and Wales. And that's an exciting thing to do. Obviously, they are of the generation where they are digital natives, so that comes with advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes they're more accepting of outputs, whether that is from social media or from an AI. So, and there have been mistakes that have been made that have been well publicized, where people have been accepting of AI outputs too readily. And so we are putting training packages out, for example, in the use of models and how you use them and what you have to do when you receive an output. You own that output. It's you. It's not the model. Don't blame the model. So if the model claims something, check it. And of course, that does then reduce some of the time benefits saved. But we're a public agency, as you said, working by consent. And that's the cost of that. We can't afford to be blasé about these things. So yeah, training programs are going out. And in actual fact, I mean, obviously I'm pro AI. You can tell that from what I've said. Some of the one of the biggest challenges I think we have is so much of the discourse is around governance and such little capacity in actual AI engineers that I'm not sure we've got the balance right. With the threat from AI and the threat from not using AI being so expansive, I think there needs to be a slight correction there where we do, as a police service in England and Wales, need to invest much more in AI architects, AI engineers, solution architects to operate in this space, because there are endless studies on it, on governance and on responsibility. And meanwhile, criminals are progressing. And I mean that in no way to do this on the cheap or to be less governance orientated or to be more blasé. I'm not, but I just think that's an area of focus that chief constables and I need to invest in.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, because the evidence is absolutely clear. The work of police forces across the world is increasing on the back of savvy criminals being able to commoditize and scale criminality right across the web, in the dark web, and in the real world across our devices. So, there's a cost benefit always in the people who are funding this, like our governments, our legislators, or our policymakers. Have you run any numbers on this around efficiency savings or counteracting crime, or is it too early for those?
No, the ambition's there. And of course, the Treasury in the UK is a body that likes to be very evidence-based. So any sort of spend, they have a sort of 4-stage model of what money will buy me what resources, that will give me what activity, that will give me what outcome and output. So as you can imagine, for a £75 million over 3-year investment, that needed to come with estimations of time saved. And I need to save 3 to 6 million hours worth of police productivity time. And I need to demonstrate that with integrity over the period of our existence. So I certainly feel the pressure, and I think rightly so, on behalf of the taxpayer, to bring in the cost benefit. And it's not all about productivity savings. I gave you the child abuse examples. It means people have to view imagery less. It means police officers and staff get to do what they are best at more. And these have well-being benefits as well as sort of productivity benefits. And of course, hopefully the public will also see the benefit of a more agile, quicker operating police force that is less clunky, because sort of non-AI digital was always clunky, wasn't it? And we have this thing called the digital paradox, where we are meant to be sophisticated and we get lost in chat rooms, going down rabbit holes of, look, I just need to speak to a human. And of course, AIs can be better. And we see, for example, West Midlands Police has an AI answering all 101 calls. And they've gone from worst performing force in the country to best. They've done quite a lot in this space, not just the AI. And if the AI spots a vulnerability in the call, no, straight to the front of the queue, so a human can speak to the human quicker, rather than getting in the old-fashioned sort of digital backlog. So, yeah, these are the challenges we're facing.
How are you dealing with the acceleration of artificial intelligence? We've seen examples where Mythos 5 from Anthropic was actually taken off the market as it was deemed too powerful to be in the hands of users. And now we have new Chinese models even out in the last week that are seen to be more superior than the US models. How are you keeping up, and how are you evolving your technology as it accelerates and it becomes more intelligent? And people will argue we're nearing super intelligence, where the models are smarter than humans.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? And you have seen the big debate going on where Kimi 3, as you've mentioned, open source and is out there, and yet you've got US models like Anthropic's Mythos where they hold them back because they're so powerful. And now there's a question, should they have held them back? But if they don't hold them back, then suddenly you have hyper cyber hacking capability in the hands of any nefarious individual. So and the speed of change, as you and I see every day, is exponential. It's cliche, but the phrases thing, AI development will never be as slow as it is today, and it's already very fast. So I think these are challenges to how we work across commercial, but also the governmental sector, because we have to be hyper agile. There are useful things here. So rarely will we be playing with frontier models because the token cost is so high, and we need to consider how we, for each context where we're using AI, balance sovereignty, balance accuracy, balance cost, and balance speed of development. And against each context, you'll probably go, this is of such seriousness, we need like the best model, and cost is of no significance. Stroke, this is a pretty mundane task, and we can use a one-of-the-middle model from last year at much low cost. The challenge, I think, is the TEV space, the testing and evaluating, because as the AIs change, we need to, because we've spoken of the public trust importance, quickly evaluate and quickly roll out, and then the models change, so we've got to do it again. And I guess one of the challenges we will have, and we haven't come across this yet, but I think it, within the next 6 months, is we buy a model and engineer it into the policing infrastructure, and then the provider of that model buys the latest update of the language model they were using, for example, which means the TEV goes back to step one again. And you sort of can't release a model in an application unless it's been evaluated effectively in the world of policing. So, yeah, this is the challenge, I think.
And you mentioned that, the weight of that budget over 3 years, lies heavily on your shoulders because you have to show transparency and also value for money. But what other things weigh heavily on you? Because this is a massive role. Nobody has all the answers for AI, but everybody has millions of questions. So how do you balance expectation, public trust, value for money, being on top of the tech, and showing leadership and bringing a team? Because it seems to me it's a huge role, it's a huge ask.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, it's incredibly exciting to be part of this and to be part of a revolution in technology that is akin to the discovery of fire. People relate it to, don't they? Or certainly of, like the Industrial Revolution. So finding our way, it is a privilege. But it comes, like with any revolution, it comes not without risk. And so I and my team will make some mistakes. I think that is perfectly plausible. And before we get too upset about that, we must remember that human beings make mistakes all the time. I know, and it'd be interesting to dive into the philosophy behind this, people accept mistakes from humans a bit better than they accept mistakes from machines. But if we can make a machine with a human digesting the output that is better than a human on their own, then that's got to be a good thing. So, yeah, the pressure is there, particularly because we're in the delivery space. And like I say, there's many AI labs that are given lots of money, but they are sort of think tanks. But we are, and I think rightly so, right on the edge of development, really. So development for everyday usage. And again, so it's a privilege, but people will have to be patient with us, I think, and we will have to learn a lot. And as a result of things changing, we will probably have to change directions. And the old way of doing things, which was, that looks promising, let's work it up, develop it, and then roll it out across the country, is probably less applicable. And I think we have to back a number of horses, some of which we will retire, having spent money on them because the rate of change is so high. So, to what extent does RAG as a methodology informing decision-making tools immediately be beaten by some agentic capability that can do the same using a different methodology? When we speak about different facets of AI, whether it's RAG, whether it's machine learning, or whether it's using agents in a particular way, and they often compete in the same use case to be the best. And we might switch course, halfway through. We don't know. But if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. And certainly that's the space that we're in, I think. And I'm really proud that the UK is doing this, because I think it's necessary.
Other jurisdictions will be watching with huge interest. And I know Ireland and the UK, we have very close working relationships from a policing perspective. And you're our greatest trading partner also. I'm sure other police forces and nation states and governments will be looking to what you're doing. Is this something that you will share knowledge and learnings with other forces?
Yeah, in actual fact, one of my deputies, Dylan Aldridge, brought over all the leading sort of AI builders in the policing environment over to the UK to red team everything we've done. And yeah, they will be watching, but no country is standing still. So I think the German police have just invested 300 million euros over 10 years in their AI capability. But not only that, I think their data engineering capability as well. So bringing together capability. The Dutch have an AI lab, obviously in the States and Canada. Australia is always incredibly progressive in this space, as are some other emerging economies. So yeah, they will be watching. I do get a sense that our flavour of focus on delivery is slightly different to others. Others don't have that pressure to deliver across thousands of police officers. But I might be wrong. But yes, there's so much to learn from each other. And we've got different enabling legislation, as you described. In the UK, we don't have the AI Act, which has both advantages and disadvantages depending on which side of the coin you're on.
If we were having another follow-up conversation in 3 years' time and you've come to the end of the 3 years of this particular project and looking ahead, what would you like to say in terms of reporting success? What is your own vision for what this will deliver for policing in the UK, for the people of the UK, and being maybe a leading light as a government public sector entity that others can look to?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I can go sort of cliche high level first, which is, I think, we recruit people into policing, both staff and officers, where we maximize their capability for what they're good at, which is engaging with people, understanding people, solving crimes. And some of the work that goes on behind the scenes is done by AI. And therefore, we are a police service that is fit for the challenges we're facing. And we are making interventions that make us more effective. Also, we are better placed to tackle every criminal that is considering how they use AI to best run their business, which is, of course, what they're doing. So that's on one stage. Second stage, I'd like to think that the literacy of us as a police service has increased significantly. And thirdly, and interestingly, and I'm playing with it conceptually at the moment, is that because I'm in police leadership, that we will have a workforce of people and agents, and we will have worked out how to lead agents like how we learn to lead people. And obviously in how they cross over, that's a whole new leadership skill that chief constables need to have built within their police forces. And at the moment, you see that operating in businesses at the moment that are pushing into this space, and we need to really quickly think about what does this mean for police leadership.
Yeah, we know agents can work 24/7, right?
Yeah, and they work 24/7. And sometimes, we always speak about the human in the loop, and the whole point of an agent is you don't have a human in the loop, but you have a human in the loop at the point where a key decision needs to be made. But with that agent workflow, you still need to have designed it and tested it and evaluated it so you can sit back and rest assured that what's happening is taking place. And you'll have heard from my use cases, and similarly with the use of agents, we don't want to move into hyper contentious space here. We want it to be operating in the background, doing, work that releases people to do what they're better to do.
Well, Al Murray, thank you so much for joining me on AI6. This is definitely a story that's going to evolve. I wish you and your colleagues the best of luck with it. It's important work, and it takes great courage and leadership when there's so many questions and also opposing voices. But AI for good is ultimately what we want to see more of, because as you said, there's enough nefarious actors in the world who are doing it for not so good. So continued success to you and your team.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Joanne. Nice to be here.